Hello and welcome to another video. In this one, I'm going to be sharing a bunch of movie recommendations of movies I love recommending to people. Some of these will be more popular ones that you may be familiar with, but a number I'm hoping are a little bit more obscure ones that you may not have heard of. But this is just going to be a comprehensive list of a number of movies that I love recommending. I'm probably going to be splitting this one into two parts, released over a couple of days just to spread it out a little bit more and not make this too long of a video. So without further ado, let's get ready and let's jump in. Kicking things off, we have one of the movies that I haven't seen this one for a little while, but I still recommend this one all the time to people, and that is Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Based on the title alone, you might think, what the heck am I walking into with this one? And that was my thought when they first released this movie, but I've since seen it a few times, and I have a really fun time with it every time I watch it. It leans enough into the historical side of things, while at the same time just going bonkers with kind of a sci-fi vampire type style to it all. It does lean into everything just the right amount. It's just the right amount of kind of cheesiness over the top, while also feeling historically significant at the same time with the character of Abraham Lincoln. It's got decent performances. The action's really cool. Some pretty good special effects. Some really neat sequences along the way. It kind of goes through the life of Abraham Lincoln's presidency in some really fun ways, playing off of the actual events that took place and some of the reasons for them. So it's definitely one that if you never gave this one a chance, I think it's worth at least one watch, even if you don't end up taking my recommendation and liking it on that one. Give this one a chance, check it out. I think it's worthy of a fun watch. Next one off the shelf is Batman Under the Red Hood. This is probably one of my favorite Batman movies. This is one I've watched a number of times. I always enjoyed watching this one growing up, and it's one that is really cool because yes, it is an animated Batman movie, but it is PG-13, so there is a darker side to it with the violence, some of the tones, the moods, the characters. Joker is very maniacal in this one, is very kind of on the level of something like a Joker scene in some of the live action films that we have on this character so far, and it does some really cool twists and turns with the kind of the Batman legacy, what it means to be Batman, the sacrifices that come with that. So this is one that if you're a fan of the Batman character and you haven't seen this one yet, I definitely recommend giving this one at least one watch, checking it out. It's one of my favorites to recommend people who are fans of Batman and maybe haven't delved into the animated stuff, because it is definitely up there with one of my favorite Batman movies for sure. Next, we have a feel-good watch, and that is Jon Favreau's Chef. This is a really, really fun one. I had wanted to see this one for the longest time. Finally, I was able to stream it once on Amazon Prime Video. Loved it. Immediately went and bought the Blu-ray, and I've watched it a few times since then. Love it even more. It's one of those movies that just works on every level for me. It's an inspiring story of a man who has kind of fallen out of love with a passion that he had for a long time in cooking food. And so he kind of reignites that by buying a food truck and just going on the road and falling in love with making food again. This is a movie you should not watch on an empty stomach, but it is one that is definitely one of those feel-good movies. I think it's very inspiring, and one that I love recommending people who are fans of Jon Favreau, as well as many of the other cameos in this one. You got Scarlett Johansson, Robert Downey Jr., Sofia Vergara's in it. There's a lot of really great kind of characters that pop up and cameos in it, but it also has a really great story. So if you're a fan of Jon Favreau, a fan of Robert Downey Jr., and like their kind of work together, I think you're definitely going to enjoy this one. It's one that I love recommending to people. I feel like this movie still doesn't quite get the love that it deserves, so I always recommend it. Next, we have one that I just watched not too long ago, or rewatched, and actually did a video on last week, and that is Dr. Sleep. This is one that is criminally underappreciated. It's not underrated at all, because pretty much everyone that has watched it has loved it, and I am a huge fan of this one. I just watched the director's cut a couple of weeks ago for the first time. Loved every minute of it. If you're a fan of The Shining, be it the movie or the book that it was originally based on, and you have not seen Dr. Sleep yet, you're doing yourself a disservice, because this is very much a love letter to both the film of The Shining and the book, as well as a very great continuation of that story. This is actually based on another of Stephen King's novels that was a follow-up to The Shining. It follows Danny Torrance many years later and kind of the effects that the past trauma had on him. I think it's a fantastic movie. Definitely check out, if you haven't yet, my video kind of giving a Christian perspective breakdown on the movie. movie and why I enjoy it so much. But if you haven't seen this one, you got to go check this one out. It's one of the best horror movies, I think. Next, we have the movie Dread. This is the remake one that came out, I think, around 2012 or so. This is one that I kind of consider another movie that I'll talk about in a little bit on this list, the American version of. And it's very straightforward, sci-fi, gritty, over-the-top action. It is very cyberpunky. You follow this Judge Dredd, as basically these guys are judge, jury, and executioner. They go out, take care of criminals, gangs, all that kind of stuff. This guy gets trapped in a building by one of the most notorious gangsters in their city, and it is up to him to get to the top, get rid of her, and get out. So might sound very familiar to the movie I'm going to be talking about soon, but this is one that I don't think, at least outside of popular film enthusiast circles, gets that much love, but it is definitely deserving of some more attention, and one that I always recommend to people. If someone is a fan of The Raid or this one, I always recommend the opposite to them because I think they're both really entertaining. Continuing on, we have one of my favorite animated and stop motion movies. I think that Laika does some of the best animated, especially from a stop motion animation point of view, films that we've ever seen. And my personal favorite from what I've seen of they've done so far is Kubo and the Two Strings. This movie I love recommending to people because partially they have a certain, maybe not stigma towards stop motion animation, but they think it can only go so far with some of the more popular and even really well done stop motion movies. But Laika does things on a whole nother level. I think they combine stop motion CGI in such fantastic, incredible ways. This movie is absolutely breathtaking to take in, and it's got a really cool, really powerful story to back it up as well. So this movie and Coraline is another one I would definitely recommend, but Coraline I think is the most popular of the Laika movies. Kubo doesn't quite get as much love as Coraline. So this is one I definitely want to recommend. If you've not checked out yet, you definitely should do so. If you're a fan of anything that Laika does or stop motion in general, something on the more Eastern culture side of things, this is definitely one I think you'll enjoy, and I always recommend people to check out. Next, we have one that I avoided this one for a long time. I thought it was just an Alien copycat clone, but it's really not. It does its own thing in a really well executed way, and that's for the movie Life. This may be presented just in the trailer as kind of an Alien type clone movie, but it's really not. It's got fantastic performance for some Jake Gyllenhaal, Rebecca Ferguson, and Ryan Reynolds is in this one. They're all really good, but this kind of tells a somewhat similar plot setup type story to Alien, in that these group of scientific astronauts come across this alien life form, bring it on board the ship, want to experiment on it, test on it, all that kind of thing. But from that point forward, it really subverts those expectations and does enough differently that I think justifies its own existence. Not that it was trying to be an Alien clone, but a lot of the marketing around it made it seem that way. So I'm really glad that I actually finally gave this one a chance. This is a perfect example of me kind of writing off a movie, then finally checking it out and actually thoroughly enjoying it. So if you've not checked out Life for reasons like me, or you just never got around to it, if you're into sci-fi, horror, that kind of thing, Life is a really good one to check out, and one that I always recommend to people, especially if they're a fan of the Alien Predator type thing and they're looking for something different. I always recommend Life. I'm gonna go ahead and do a couple more, and then we'll wrap up this as part one, and part two will come out in a couple of days or so. Next, we have the movie Love and Monsters. This was the one that came out kind of during COVID and stuff, so it wasn't hugely successful when it came out, but I feel like it definitely got some recognition and appreciation. It was on a number of top 10 lists from the year that it came out, but it doesn't get a ton of reference now, being a few years removed from it. But it's a really, really fun, unique post-apocalyptic type movie. It seems like it's gonna kind of go one way, but then not far into the movie, it does its own thing, sets itself apart from your traditional post-apocalypse type films. So you got a really good performance from Dylan O'Brien in this one. There's a fun supporting cast as well. Michael Rooker, I think is his name, the guy from The Walking Dead and a number of other things. He's really good. He gives a really good performance in this one. So if you never gave this one a chance, or maybe this is your first time hearing about it, definitely check out Love and Monsters. It's a really fun, entertaining, post-apocalyptic movie that also has a really good, entertaining story to back it up. All right, last one for part one, and then we'll continue in a few days with part two, and that's going to be Malignant. So Malignant is another one this is one of those day and date ones that came out on Max during COVID years and stuff like that. And though it was fairly successful when it came out, and it is popular enough, especially in film enthusiast kind of circles, this is one that I always enjoy recommending to people if they're looking for a horror movie that kind of leans into its kind of campiness a little bit, but also subverts a bit of your expectations going in, I think, because I really didn't know what to expect going into this one. I kind of had a bit of an idea. And then once it just started playing out and those final twists and turns came and revealed themselves, I fell in love with the movie. I think it's thoroughly entertaining. It's one I've enjoyed going back and revisiting, recommending to people, talking to with people about it. It's one that I think if you are into horror at all and you haven't seen this one, which probably isn't likely, but go ahead and check this one out. Or if you're looking for one that's kind of plays off of some traditional horror tropes, but does things in a more interesting, unique way, check this one out. I think it's a really enjoyable, really fun watch, as far as horror movies go, that is. And I think like this one wouldn't be a horrible introductory type horror movie. At the same time, you might not appreciate it as much if you're not into the horror type genre, but it's one I really enjoy recommending to people as well. So that wraps up part 1. I'm going to go ahead and continue going through the rest of these. We'll put out part 2 in a few days or so, just so we keep this video from being a little bit too long. So come back, join me. I'm going to probably put this out Tuesday or Wednesday, so a few days after this one will go out. I hope you are coming back. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this one. I got 8 more recommendations coming your way in part 2. I'll see you on the next one.